Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for Zooming. Thank you for being here in person. This has been a great couple of weeks for Democrats of the Red Rocks. I am Ellen Ferreira. I'm the president of Democrats of the Red Rocks. We have had, since our last breakfast, we've had two amazingly wonderful events. We had Dancing with the Dems on May the 20th, which was fabulous. Everybody that came had a wonderful time. We raised a good amount of money. And more importantly, we all had a great time together and bonded as a community. We also had an event, not a fundraiser, it was a meet and greet for Congressman Ruben Gallego. And that was terrific. People came to the DORR office and we took over the entire courtyard at DORR. And Congressman Gallego was wonderful. His remarks were fabulous. He shook hands with just about everybody there. Lots of selfies were taken. So that was a great event. And then there was this matter of a 37 count indictment. Small matter. That was energizing and made people feel like, yes, we can do this. We need to fight. We need to keep going. One of the important things, well, let me just mention on your desks or tables here in the room here, you will see postcards addressed to the Environmental Protection Office. Please fill them out. And please, do you want them to come to you, Peg, or Peggy Chaikin will make sure that they all get in the mail. This is very, very important. This is an important issue. And it's, our climate has to be our #1 issue, because if the climate keeps getting worse, our livability on this planet keeps getting worse as well. And the disasters that we saw recently on the East Coast, I think, were eye-opening to the people living there as to what people in the West Coast have been dealing with for many, many years. So please fill these out and send them in. Today's program is an important one and will be fascinating, I know. We've got several young people that are going to be here with us today, and people watching at home or people that don't know Sedona very well. We don't have many young people. So we do have a high school. We do have young people in Cottonwood. We do have people in Flagstaff. We've got lots of young people around us. Getting them to register and to vote is critical. Our first speaker is Laura Brill. She is the founder and CEO of the Civic Center. theciviccenter.com if you want to go on there and see what they're doing. It's an amazing organization. All we have to say in Laura's biography is she's a lawyer and she clerked for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Oh, wow. Beyond that, she is a mother of 2 adult children. She has been doing equality and activist work for many, many years. And she founded this organization called the Civic Center, specifically with the idea of registering high school students. Got a captive audience, and when they're registered, they tend to vote. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce and welcome Laura Brill from the Civic Center. Laura?
Hi, thank you so much. It's so great to be with all of you, and I'm just delighted by all of your enthusiasm. I will say we are a 501c3, and so all of our work is nonpartisan, and we think that's especially important in terms of work. Can you hear me? Of working with high schools. So can you remind me how much time you want me to, because I know we have other speakers who you all want to listen to, and I don't want to over
about 20 minutes. Do the slideshow presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll take some questions.
Perfect. Okay, that sounds great. So I'll just tell you my story quickly. It was after the 2016 election and seeing all of the attacks starting to mount on our democratic institutions and on the independence of judges and the rise in racism and all the other challenges we were facing and trying to figure out what I could do to make a difference. And I picked up a copy. I live in Los Angeles. I picked up a copy of the California election code to try to understand why hadn't more young people turned out in the 2016 election, which seemed like it was going to be pretty consequential. And, I did a Google search first, and, why don't young people turn out and vote? And, you get all these answers like young people are apathetic, young people are self-centered, young people are on their phones or watching video games. And, my two kids were 15 and 16 at the time. They're both in college now. And I just kind of struck me as, yeah, they are on their phones. That's true. But they're not worse than a lot of older people in terms of apathy and self-centeredness and, all these vices that got attributed to them. And, maybe something else is going on here that isn't just that young people aren't any good. And so I picked up this California election code, and I discovered that we have pre-registration in California beginning at age 16. And I had no idea about this law at the time. And I just felt like, wow, that's a huge opportunity in high schools. Everybody's in high school, whether they're, college bound or not. And I thought, gee, if I haven't heard of this law, maybe other people haven't either. And that turned out to be true. I just, I kind of made it my business to ask as many people as possible. And really, there was just no awareness basically about this law, and very, almost no implementation of it. So we had this permissive law in California, but no one was breathing life into it in the schools. Arizona, you don't have pre-registration as soon as you turn 16, but you can register if you're not yet 18, but will be 18 by the next general federal election. So that's effectively a two-year chunk of time where, again, people can be brought into the process in high schools. And it's really an incredible opportunity. So I will share, let me share my screen to show you, there we go. Let me share my screen to show you some of the data that supports doing this this work. So I have to so these are two different numbers that both represent youth turnout. 23% is when you look at young people ages 18 to 29 without regard to whether they're registered. So that's the percentage of young people who turned out in the midterms in 2022. Young people who were, and so this was making headlines right after the midterms of, this is great, we have one of the highest rates of youth voting ever, 23%, let's celebrate. And to me, how can we be happy about 23%? That is not a good number. That is very, very low. I like to focus on 86%, which represents the percentage of young people who are registered and turn out. This is from 2020. In 2020, I always say, like, if there's nothing else you retain from this, it's that when young people are registered, they turn out. So this is, the data is from the census, and it's, I think most people are just very shocked to realize what high turnout rates we have once young people are registered. And this is breaking it down among, specific age, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and overall, it's above 85%, and almost every age within that range is, they're all over 80%. So the other statistic we looked at is like, well, was it, we know 2020 was unusual in many ways, but the fact is, going all the way back to 2004, more than 75% of young people who are registered turn out. And there's just a huge obstacle to getting young people registered in the first place. In fact, it's the registration rate for 18 and 19-year-olds is almost 25 percentage points lower than for 35 people aged 35 and above. So that's about 2 million people missing from the voter registration rolls every single, at any given time. And it's all due to the fact that we just have not been implementing voter registration in high schools. So this slide shows the impact that we can have in certain states that have the most competitive elections. And of course, Arizona is in there. Arizona, you have basically 180,000 people turning, who are going to be 18 and 19 in 2004. And of course, in the 2020, you have the margins of victory for, so many elections in Arizona are just dwarfed by this, huge number of what we think of as a renewable resource, young people, constantly aging into the process. And it's really up to us whether or not we can engage these folks and get them registered. And also just to know, this is how many, 2, 4, 6, 8, this is 10 states. So it's about 3 million voters in just these 10 states who are going to be, voting in their first election in 2024. So all across the country, it's both in Arizona and all across the country, young people can have a huge impact in elections. Just here's another visualization of it, which is showing in the dark purple the number of people who turn 18 every year. I mean, I'm sorry, in the light purple, the number of people who are turning 18 every 4-year cycle, and in the bottom, the margin of victory in 2020. And Arizona, you can see yours is very dramatic. And you can do this you could do this exercise for any close election, comparing the number of young people who are going to be turning 18 to the margin of victory, and it just gets dwarfed. So what are the problems if it's not just that young people aren't any good? And so there's a real lack of information and outreach. There was a Pew study a few years ago that only 6% of young people are asked to register in high school. There's an overall lack of civics education beyond just the mechanics and understanding the importance of voting. There's a real lack of data and research, and as I was saying, implementation laws and supportive policies. For example, we've done a lot of looking at school district policies, and most of them, have policies on all kinds of things, student discipline and data sharing and sports participation, and very little on or nothing usually on implementing voter registration. And an overall lack of coordination and accountability. So if you were to ask, well, whose job is it? Is it the registrar? Is it the teacher? Is it the parent? And there's a real lack of clarity about that. I wanted to say one other thing about just data and research, and that is that even in states like California, where we can pre-register at 16, young people are not in the voter file typically until they're age eligible to actually vote. So even when people are, so it's very hard to get really good information about how you're doing registering high school students as they come along, and the lack of data has fed, I believe, into underinvestment in the area, because people want to know what's the outcome, and that's one of the problems we're working really hard to solve. So as I said, our solution is pre-registering teens to vote in high school. This slide is showing all of the states and the different state laws in which it's possible to pre-register. The light pink, those are 17 states where you have pre-registration available at age 16. The dark pink is states that allow at least a year in which young people can register before their first election. So it's altogether, that's 36 states that allow at least a year. And even in the other states, like in Texas, for example, you cannot submit a voter registration form till you're 17 years and 10 months. And that's because we all know our 10-month birthday and have it written down, and our friends send us cards, and it's a cultural tradition to know when you turn 17 and 10 months. But even in Texas, I like to say, most young people are old enough by the time they graduate. And so part of the work, since we live in a, we have our system of federalism, and different states have a very important role in elections. So the object is to spread pre-registration at 16 and to make that ubiquitous. And in the meantime, marry the election calendar to the high school calendar so that everybody can register as soon as they're old enough, wherever they are. And by the way, Minnesota just enacted, it's the newest entrance, its law just went into effect July 1st for pre-registration at 16. And New York is a very recent new entry, and also Virginia just in the past couple of years. So the number of states that are adding pre-registration at 16 is, really is growing. And we think there's opportunities in Pennsylvania and Michigan to do the same, which would be incredible. And maybe you all will make Arizona on the list. High schools are very important as a place for organizing, because because 40% of high school students don't go on to college. And so high school is really the most equitable place to make sure voter registration reaches everyone. It's also efficient because we can take advantage of the existing educational structure and the recurring cycle and create a tradition in high schools. And finally, there's all the research that shows that voting early creates a lifelong habit. And so this adds to the efficiency, because when we register someone when they're in high school, you're not just engaging them for one election, but you're engaging them in an ongoing way throughout their lives. It's important to know also that the youth vote is not a monolith. And one of the data challenges that we face is that a lot of youth-oriented organizations and a lot of youth data talk about 18 to 24-year-olds as a single group, or 18 to 29-year-olds. And as these two contrasting photos are showing, the teens in high school are just at a very different stage of life than, people who've graduated from high school or in graduate school, who've graduated from college and, are on and embarking on their careers. And, even just high school and college, high schools have different educators involved, different administrations involved, different school rules. They have the role of parents is much more significant for high schools. And so the way you engage, and just their, educational development and attainment is at a different stage. So it's very important to think, when we hear about youth voting, to ask the question, okay, but what about the youngest voters? Because, by the way, their registration rates are just shockingly low compared to other youth. So we've been looking all over the country at registration rates for 18-year-olds, and in most places, under 30% of 18-year-olds are registered. Under 30%. So they cannot, that's, even if they're turning out at 75%, that's a very low, you're just not going to get a high turnout rate. So this is where the biggest opportunity exists, we think, in terms of bringing young people into democracy. One more point about our approach, because our approach is really to train students and educators and provide them with materials to hold their own voter registration drives in their own high schools. And, there's a lot of emphasis on online outreach and social media outreach, all of which is very important, but it's not enough in terms of reaching the youngest voters, because they face intentional barriers in voter suppression states. They can face ID laws. They don't know, what their social security number is, or, they may have questions about why they should register in the first place, or they see politicians as unresponsive. And so they need a lot of, they need personal touch points to welcome them and encourage them. And one of the important reference points I like to say is like, we can all imagine what brought us here today. And usually it's because somebody, somebody you care about asked you, to do something. And that's true for any important decision we make in our lives. And so that's true also for youth voting. So our approach is to focus on data and drives and to provide training and events. And you can see here, I'll just say one more word about data. So we've tried to solve this problem of young people not being in the voter file by doing kind of a clever workaround. So since we can't reliably measure registration rates for people who aren't yet 18, we're using voter files to parse out registration data on the school district level, or sometimes on the city and county level, and to compare that very local data with population rates, and to get what's the voter registration rate for 18-year-olds in a school district or in a city or county. And what we find is that this is incredibly motivating to the students, because they can think, okay, well, I don't know, I can't do something about, all 18 to 29-year-olds throughout the United States, but I can actually move the needle on this metric because, first of all, it's so low. And second of all, I actually know the people in my high school. And if I ask them to register to vote, they'll do it. And so I can make a difference. So that's how and the other thing, when we parse things out at the school district level and look just at 18-year-olds, it gives us a very good measure for holding school districts accountable and for saying, actually high school is at least one place where robust voter registration efforts should be happening. And you can track those changes over time in terms of how, when schools have better programs, how they're able to increase their voter registration rates. We hold 2 annual events that are nationwide, cap, gown, and ballot in the spring to encourage everybody to register before they graduate high school, and high school voter registration week in the fall to align with National Voter Registration Day, and also with pre-election deadlines. I think I'll stop my slideshow, but I want to just talk about one more, stop share. Okay, sorry. I want to just talk about, we've done a test in Orange County to compare school districts with schools that have had our program, where the teens are running the drives in the school with their teachers, to other school districts that haven't had that programming. And we were able to show a 6.3 percentage point increase in the voter registration rate for 18-year-olds as a result of the students holding the drives. And so we're in the process of just doubling down and increasing all of our work to get as many students to hold the drives as possible, training educators, and then providing the data and the measurement to follow up. So I think with that, I would love to just answer questions that you may have.
Okay, Diana,
Yeah. My question is, how do you get access to high school students?
Yeah.
I have inquired here in Sedona to try and see whether or not we can get in, and I've been discouraged. And I don't think that barrier is insurmountable, but do you have techniques to make that happen?
Well, I mean, that's part of the reason that we train students and educators. And so we want very much for the motivation to be coming from the student, because we think that, and with the support of the educator, because we think that it just changes the dynamic within a school. They're not, responding to an outside group. They're, Sally wants to hold a voter registration drive. That's a wonderful civic engagement activity. Of course, we should support her. And so we try to get to know as many teachers as possible, and to get the teachers to then come to a training themselves so that they can be faculty advisors and to refer their students to come and get trained. And then when we provide these annual events like High School Voter Registration Week and Cap, Gown, and Ballot, it's kind of to create a container that rather than, we're not running the drives, we're providing kind of a messaging container and materials that the students can take advantage of and say, oh, this, we're part of something bigger and we want to do this, we want to implement it locally where we are. So I think recruiting, recruiting students and empowering them is the, the most effective way. I mean, we've also, part of that approach is also just evolved out of, during the pandemic, we just determined, look, it was going to be impossible to get school districts to do anything because like they're so, so overloaded. So we do, but over the long term, I think working with school districts, having the school districts implement policy, I mean, that takes a very long time. That's the other thing. It's like you could spend quite a long time on, trying to get it formalized, but so we want to start now, but over time, that's a good goal. That's an important goal.
I have a question from Zoom. Peggy Glenn wants to know if there are any print assets available or if there's a procedure manual.
Yeah, so we have a couple of things. We have the slides I showed. We have basically two different decks on our website, and after I talk, I'll put some resources in the chat. We have one on why high school voter registration matters. We have one on understanding the youth vote, and then we have a resources page with a lot of other resources that can use. So graphics, for example, when the students come to our training session and register their drive with a faculty advisor, we will send them a democracy in a box toolkit, which has stickers and pins and other swag to hold their drives. In California, we were able to prepare a toolkit just a guide for educators that goes through all the different California laws that are relevant and talks to educators about how they can help. We haven't yet had the funding to do that in Arizona, but that's a goal because we really want to be very active throughout the Southwest. So.
Thank you, Laura. So if you post them, I will make those links available to our mailing list.
Great.
Okay, we have two questions from in the room here, Peggy and then B.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today. It is really exciting, invigorating. My question is, do you collaborate with the League of Women Voters? Because in the past, I myself and other people here have gone into the high school, into classrooms, the honors English program, for example, and into the cafeteria to register voters. And that's been our mechanism because they pretty much handle. So I wonder if you coordinate with them and that because they are the familiar faces and the familiar label here in these more conservative communities.
Yeah, so we love the League of Women Voters. We work with them on a number of different initiatives. I would say because they're so decentralized, we haven't gotten to know every local league. But I would love an introduction to the folks in your area, and there's very nice collaborations that are possible.
Can coaches help?
Yeah, coaches can help. I mean, it's so interesting because it's like what's the right person can be just very, it's very different from school to school. It's who cares about the issue and who cares about the teens and who they look to. So sometimes it's a social studies teacher, sometimes it's a guidance counselor. Sometimes it's the debate coach or the student newspaper advisor, and sometimes it's a coach. So it's really a matter. So much of this is relationship building and trying to bring this to make it real for what works in the particular school.
Laura, can you put your information in the chat when you're finished?
Yes.
Or should people contact you at the civiccenter.org?
Yes, they can contact me at the civiccenter.org.
Laura, thank you so much. This has been fascinating and eye-opening. Before I heard you, I've never even heard the term pre-registered. So this is something that we should all keep in mind too. I hope you can stick around, Laura, because your presentation dovetails perfectly into our next presentation, where we have two people in the room with us, Brandy Reese and Elijah Watson. Welcome. They're
Great,
going
thank you so
to-
much. I'm just gonna sign off there. I mean, I'm gonna hide myself and put my stuff in the chat, but thank you so much. This has been great, and I will stick around.
Okay, that would be great, because I think the questions that come out of this discussion, as well as our next one, Haley Creighton from the Arizona Students Association will probably be relevant to you as well. Brandy is a good friend. She works with Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. We've had them here before several times, Kathy Sigmund and who else? Melinda Iyer, who does the Iyer report, and Tricia Sauer is, yes, head of Indivisible for all of Arizona. And so they're good friends, and I frankly don't know how activism could have even survived without those two groups, Indivisible and CEBV, which is, rolled into one. Brandy is a forensic scientist and a former police officer, and I mention this, a former candidate for the House of Representatives here in Arizona, the legislature. So she's the contact and one of the people who are launching Civic Engagement Beyond Voting -Y Youth. Nice. Elijah, welcome.
Hello.
I used to be a CEO of a business, and I was in a CEO group, and I would go into a room and it was all men and me. And you must feel it's like you have entered a room of grandparents. We want you to eat, take muffins, whatever you want, enjoy yourself. No, we're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
You and Haley will be our the voices and faces of the youth here. Elijah has done so much. I can't begin to tell you how much his activism has helped in the state of Arizona, and he continues to be an activist. I'd like you to tell everybody a little bit more about yourself, how old you are. He's testified before the Arizona State Legislature in the House and the Senate. He's written editorials in the paper. I mean, he's just done a whole lot of things. And so we'd like to hear from you about what CEBV-Y is doing. And I'd kind of like to know what turned you on. What made you different than all of
Don't worry, I have a lot to say.
Okay, all right. Well, welcome and thank you for being here. The camera for the Zoom link is up there. So there are people on Zoom as well as
Very
the
good.
room. Yeah. Okay, welcome.
All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry we were tardy. GPS is a wonderful thing, but sometimes it's not always our friend. So I appreciate the opportunity to come up and speak to you today. Thank you, Ellen. All of you guys are very good friends. They've been very helpful. And as she mentioned, I did run State House of Representatives last cycle in, I live in LD 14, which is Gilbert, Arizona. You may or may not know that district. It's very, very red. And so, it was a challenge, but I learned a lot. And so many people in this room and on the Zoom, I saw Peggy Glenn's name pop up. She, I know, made phone calls for me. Janine made phone calls for me. And I know people made donations and phone calls, and it was so appreciated because I think people in red districts get overlooked sometimes. And we're out knocking doors and getting votes for governor and secretary of state and all those offices too. So the reason I got involved in all this, as she mentioned, I do work for Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. I started as the media coordinator and witness coordinator. So people that wanted, like Elijah, to come and give testimony down at the legislature. I would go with them, help them find their way, go with them into the room, help them figure out what they wanted to say and prepare it in advance. And then after that, I worked with Laura Tarrick in that capacity. You may know Laura. She's actually a representative now in LD4. And And then afterwards, have that message amplified and sent further through the media, trying to get press and media interviews and social media. We had groups that were helping propagate it that way. So I met Elijah last year. He was just so striking to me because he was still in high school. Right? And so engaged and active. He has grown since then, believe it or not.
Few
Yes.
inches.
Yeah, a couple inches. And so, but it was amazing to me and interesting to me that he was so active and engaged and involved and interested in what was happening at the legislature. And so he came down to speak. So that's how I got to know him. And then as Ms. Brill mentioned, we've learned that not a lot of people in that Gen Z group have been reached out to or understand the importance of why they need to be registered to vote or that they should vote. And so CEBV this year decided one of our goals would be to really reach out to and try to figure out ways to coordinate and work with that group. And through our support network, figure out a way to have them be the ones who are doing the work and doing the activism and going into, like, again, like Ms. Brill mentioned, going into the schools and registering their friends and peers, because that's relational organizing, right? You're much more likely to do something if you know someone who's doing it and are interested and engaged that way. And so that's how I got to meet Elijah. And so he was a natural fit and a natural ask to help head up this work. And so with that, I will turn it over to Elijah and let him tell you more, because that's why we're here, right? To learn from them. So I will stop talking now and turn over the floor.
I'm going to
You
sit. I am going to
Okay.
sit because I do not like standing. Hello, everyone. It's so good to see everyone. Yeah, great introduction from Brandy. Elijah Watson. I go around Arizona. I'm like an equitable education advocate, if that makes a lot of sense. I go to a lot of school boards now. Previously, I was always in the legislature all the time. I cannot tell you how many days I spent at the legislature in people's offices and in committee rooms testifying on bills and talking to journalists and so much more. But just to get a little bit into my background before I get into why youth outreach is super important. I started getting involved because I was in a school district where I saw a lot of problems like crippling infrastructure in our school classrooms. I saw a lot of students that didn't see a future for themselves. I went to Phoenix Union. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the district. It is 98 to 97% person of color. The district is 27% of students are below the impoverishment rate. So it is a district where there are a lot of problems, right? There are going to be a lot of issues when it comes to just ensuring that students feel like they are in a space where they can succeed. And so I came from Kansas. I moved to Phoenix Union when I was in my sophomore year, and I immediately saw these problems and I was like, no, we're going to fix that. We're going to change that. And so I started by, talking to my teachers, talking to people in the district, going to school board meetings, talking there and testifying and trying to work with our school board members to get some of these problems fixed. And then once I realized that the school board couldn't do so much, that's when I went to the legislature and started advocating for my peers and other people like that. So that's my general background. But started working with CEBV-Y this, February, March,
Yes.
something like that.
Yes.
CEBV-Y is really focused on ensuring that our young people are not only engaged in their communities, but that they're mobilizing themselves and their peers to stay engaged with their local boards and commissions. That's like our big push that we really try to push. Yes, Civic Engagement Beyond Voting, -Y, it's abbreviated. Yeah, the Y stands for youth, if it was clear.
And that's one of the differences between how our age groups say it. I pronounce the letters individually, And so, yeah, these are things that we have found we need to figure out how we even speak to each other. And for real, there was a learning curve there of how do we engage with you? How do we talk with you? What actual media would you respond to? It's not so much email. And so, sorry to interrupt, but it's kind of dovetails.
The feedback needed to be. So, our organization is really pushing right now the need for young people to stay involved with our local boards and commissions, because we know that those are the places where the impact is going to directly affect the students every single day, right? We know if you go to a school board, all it takes is one vote to change that student's entire life, right? At least for the next 4 years that they're in high school, or 3 years, whatever it may be. So that's the push that we've really tried to bring out. I think it's really important to notice why youth outreach is important, because it's something that's definitely forgotten in a lot of these spaces. And as if it hasn't been said before, I'll say it again, because I did come late into the presentation and I did love Laura Brill's presentation, but young people get stuff done. And that's not an overestimation, okay? Look at Georgia. Young people turned out by 3% more than the average American did in the Georgia Senate race to give Raphael Warnock a chance in the Senate in the special election. Wisconsin, Tony Evers was reelected, 2.9% increase in youth outreach and youth voter propensity in that race. Not to mention the fact that in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, individual expenditure groups and other organizations all worked and invested in youth outreach, and youth voter outreach was one of the sole reasons that Janet, I'm going to mispronounce her name, Prolasapowicz, got onto the Supreme Court. That is a big win, right? In Arizona, young voters turned out all across Arizona, and even though it might not have been what we wanted as far as how big it was, youth voters did turn out. And not only did we get Attorney General Mace from Prescott. Yeah, can we get a clap for that real quick? Yeah, well, exactly, 280 votes, but we still got the first Democratic Attorney General in over 10 years, and Governor Hobbs, the first Democratic governor in over 10 years, and Adrian Fontes also. So, I mean, I think it's worth stating that, you know, when young people show up and when we invest in young people get stuff done. Young people can bring these solutions to us. And so I believe if we keep engaging young people and keep them engaged with the things that really do matter, that whether that be their school boards, whether that be the water board, whether that be the legislature, if we keep them involved, we can ensure that Arizona will not only be blue, but also that we're all in a better place when we don't get bold and crazy. Okay. Yeah.
So one of our first meetings that we had with the youth, we were, and this is what we will ask all of you to do. We were contacting individual people in this generation. As again, I refer back to Laura Brill's presentation, it is a diverse group, right? High schoolers are very different than towards the end of it. So we reached out to CEBV-Y or CEBV leadership reached out to people in that group that we knew personally, either through Elijah or our own children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, all of that, to start the process, right? Because everyone knows someone in that age range. And then we're asking them to, you know someone, it's like a pyramid scheme, except we're using it for good. So, you bring in a friend and then you tell two friends and then you tell two friends. And so what we found was we surveyed that group of young people, and what was interesting and what was important to them are very much the same things that are important to most Democrats. And so they align very well with Democrats in that age group. Things like education and LGBTQ rights and water and the environment and those things. And so that's why, in my opinion, it's so important for us to engage and let them know why it's important that they vote, because these issues are important to them. And as we like to say at CEBV, if you aren't at the table, you're probably on the menu. And so, the way that this so far has started is we have two main prongs of the youth group. We are focusing on mostly people have been engaged and involved in school boards. So we have certain school boards where people are going, staying in contact, attending those meetings, giving comments and reporting back. And then there's also the voter registration group. And so we've had 2 voter registration drives that have been done by people who are within our youth. One is Sarah, and she went to her school. And this is the thing that we talked about. They're much more likely to administration, school administration, teachers, all that, they're much more likely to be open to it if a student comes to them and asks them to. If I go in, and I have gone into schools to speak to faculty and things and tried to get into those groups, and they're leery, you know, they've heard the right wing media, they've heard you're trying to indoctrinate our kids and all of this stuff. And even if those faculty and administrators don't themselves believe that, they think that other parents might think that or fear that. And so we very much try to find, you know, our speaker, our ambassador, really, to go into those places. And so Sarah went into her school and did a week-long drive. We collaborate with other groups who have like-minded goals. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel or do things that other people are doing. We don't want to, you know, we don't want to waste our efforts. But they went in and she enrolled almost 100 students that week in her school alone. And then another CEBV youth went into his school and he enrolled 75-ish kids. And so if we consider that the vast majority of those voters will be Democratic voters, or at least progressive voters, and you think Chris May is only won by 280 votes. Well, those kids almost made that themselves. And that's just 2 drives we've done. So we are working on creating, we've talked to Ms. Brill and the Civic Center about creating some more collaborations there and using the benefits of the information that she has. Because that's what we like to do at CEBV, is really be a force multiplier and take things that other people know and methods that work and just use that and work together.
Yeah.
Anything else to say? You're the speaker here today.
I mean,
not to do all the talking.
I think you kind of covered that really well. I do want to put out one little focus as well, because I did forget to mention this, right? That Civic Engagement Beyond Voting youth is really focused on high schoolers. And I loved what Laura Brill said, which is that high schoolers are not the same as college students. High schoolers are not the same as 28 and 29-year-old people, right? They're in much different parts of their lives. When I got engaged with things, I had no resources to stay engaged, right? Because one, transportation is an issue at all times when you're a high schooler, right? You got to find a way to go to events. College places usually don't come to high schools, right? Youth outreach organizations don't come to high schools. There's always some type of divide there. So I feel as though our organization is mainly focused on high school students, because these are the students that, one, don't get the outreach, and 2, are probably the ones that are going to be the most impactful when they go to their school board or when they go to another boarding commission, because they are so young, but they are also so eloquent and so passionate about the issues that they care about. So what I will say is, if you have any high schoolers, send them our way, please. We need more. So
I think one of your best things to say to high schoolers are, you're old enough to sign up to go to war and die for this country, but you need to be voting, you know.
We should have a say in whether you go to war or not.
Yes. People are welcome in,
Yes.
welcomed into the schools and say, here, try to talk these children into going out and joining you. There should be as big a push to get in the vote.
yeah, I mean, definitely. I think one of the big pushes that we try to highlight to high schoolers, especially, right, is not necessarily saying, you know, this is something that you're going to be directly impacted by. We don't want to lecture students, obviously, because that doesn't make people passionate. But the thing that we really do try to push on is teaching them and showing them why things are important, right? When you take them to that first school board meeting, they are going to sit there and they're going to say, why am I listening to this woman talk about bonds? They don't care about bonds. They don't want to. They're like, we do not want to listen to this, right? But once you take them that first board meeting and you show them, listen, like this thing that they just proposed, like literally 6 minutes ago, just passed, and now that teacher that you have is getting a $100 raise or a $100 decrease in their salary, right? Once they hear that, that's when they really start to notice that there is the change that happens in these local boards and commissions is crucial. It is going to change them in some way or another. So I do agree with you 100% that we do really have to highlight that when we outreach to young people, that the issues that they care about are 100% going to impact them, and they should care, because if they don't care, you know, they could be on the wrong side of history.
Hey, can I just jump in for 1 second? First of all, because sorry, what you all were saying, I just started getting more and more excited hearing about hearing your approach and hearing your numbers. I mean, just so everybody knows, like having a high school student run a drive where they're getting 75 registrations, 100 registrations, that's a huge accomplishment. And, you know, part of what I also like to reflect to people is, you know, to have a student do all of this work of like connecting with their volunteers, connecting with your organization, connecting with their school administration. This is both in terms of the students' advancement in the future and team building and being able to set a goal and accomplish it. It's just, anyway, it's just really incredible. And the other just word I want to throw out is that these collaborations are the key, you know, I believe, because it's all about these relationships and the relationships that you're building and talking to people and starting where you are, helping the students articulate for themselves what matters to them, you know, and that's where all the motivation comes from. And anyway, I just wanted to chime in and say, I'm so happy to have had the chance to listen to you all. It's really inspiring.
Thank you. That's so nice.
George? I have a question to you. How did you get your passion? You may have felt it, but were your parents active in, you know, in their town or whatever? Or what presented you to do what you do?
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Kansas. So my family was not active in politics. I don't know if anyone, rural voters, you understand, being the odd Democrat out is not a good look. And being an active odd Democrat out is really hard. So growing up in rural Kansas, no, I had no sign of people that were even mildly political active, other than the fact that my mom voted for Obama. So when I came to Arizona, that was really the moment where I started to have my passion come true, I guess, if that makes sense. And it was really when I started to say, you know, I might have came from rural Kansas and there might have been some problems in rural Kansas, right? But we get along with each other in rural Kansas. And we also know when there's a problem, we can fix it, right? And I think that message and that, I guess,
ethos.
Yes, absolutely. That ethos that I've grown up around has really moved me and has made my passion a lot better. Because once I came to Arizona, I mean, literally within 2 or 3 months of being in high school, I was immediately like, we need to get some change on this school board. And I was right into talking to school board members, just going to school board meetings, just some random, young high school student with a turtleneck on and a suit thinking that he was the next rising politician, trying to talk to everybody. So.
Yeah, and I participated in voter registration at our local high school quite a number of years ago, actually a couple of times, and it was dismal. The kids were not interested at all. They, their attitude, well, what sense does that make?
Yeah.
And so the idea of working with other kids and having them present registration, and obviously your numbers really show, and I'm hoping we can do that here.
You need to find one really good starting youth.
Most of us don't know any.
Sandy Amerso is very involved with the Lions Club, and there are people here that are involved with Rotary. They give scholarships to the high school kids. Tons of scholarships, right? And those kids are grateful and motivated and they may be good contacts, good touch points.
And also, I do have a student that I've been tutoring for a long time. He's Mexican American, and I would love to get him involved. So what would be the steps that I would do to get him?
That's
and I would
exciting.
help him, but he's Mexican American, so there are a lot of kids in the school that are Mexican American citizens. He would be a great asset to do that.
We would love to have that connection. What I will say is after this is wrapped up, we would love to chat with you and just we'll give you our contact information so we can reach out and just start that connection because that was a crucial connection for us.
All right, let's hear from George and then Diana, and then I want to bring on Haley Creighton, who's waiting in Zoom land somewhere. And she'll probably want to add to this conversation as well.
I wanted to ask, and it's related to the question that Ronnie asked about, well, you know, where is this thing that will impact you? And it's not an election point. The question really is, you're focused on issues that are directly impacting students. And my experience with people as adults is, who cares whether I vote or not? Because it doesn't matter whether it's a Democrat or Republican, nothing changes. And pretty much that's been the issue. And it's one of the things that seems to be changing in the world is this passion which youth are bringing to some of these issues. So I guess my broader question is, do you see simply getting involved in the political and policy issues that are impacting students will then bring them to other things? Or are these sort of percolating in the background, but there's no way that you can really talk about?
I think it's a really good question. I actually really appreciate you asking that question because I think it is impactful in its premise. I think when we engage these young people and we tell them that not only can they go obviously to a school board and speak, that's one thing, right? But also when we can tell them that they are able to foster relationships with lawmakers and elected officials and people that directly represent them and have been crucially ignoring them for so many years. When we're telling them that they're able to work with these people to actually bring some type of effective change to these local boards and commissions or, you know, just overall these communities, I think that really will push them to say, okay, well, I know I have some impact in this world. I know that I can actually do something. And, you know, therefore, I think from there on, we can actually get Democrats in office, whether that be, you know, other legislators, other school board members in the community that have worked with these young people, or whether that be way later down the line, these young people themselves, because they will have that experience of saying, I've gotten things done before. I've been able to pass types of policies that are actually drastically affecting students in a positive way. And so, yeah.
What LD are you here?
One.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. So your lawmakers are
Ken Bennett?
Kim Bennett,
Selena Bennett, Selena Bliss, and how do you say his last?
Wen,
Yeah.
Quang Wen.
Wen.
So this young man right here has gone and talked to them personally. Like he has, I don't know what to say, gumption. It's kind of an old timey word, but that's something I would use. To go up to them in the legislature and just introduce himself and say, I would like to talk to you. I would like to meet with you. And so he is meeting with Ken Bennett and discussing policy for next year.
Often, yeah.
And so that's the kind of thing
Empowerment.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, these people are just people. And if we stop pretending that they are untouchable or, you know, and most of them, I mean, Ken Bennett is actually a nice person. I like him on a personal level. I think he's, of the lawmakers that are down there, I think he actually listens and is willing to talk. Like I said, he's willing to talk to Elijah.
He considers me a friend, so,
Yeah.
no, I mean, really think about that.
You know, I think it's just, we need youth like him as the example of, you can do this, you can talk to them and they will talk to you. You may not always agree, but you know, it's a stepping stone. It's a stepping stone. Yeah. I think Elijah is, I don't think we should expect that of all youth, right? I think he's a little bit special, more than special in that regard. But it is a good example to set of, you know, don't be afraid, don't be intimidated. They're just people. And
You have something, Diana?
Just really quickly to you, actually, and
Yes.
to DORR is maybe we should be having our own youth scholarship or small scholarships or something like that in order to get that engagement and that look.
Yeah, I
We
agree.
could do that.
I like that. I like that. And that would put us in touch with the high school population.
I just want to just remind everybody that the youth in Montana having their court case right now, and it's so significant, and they are such great examples and motivators for a lot of younger people, and that's the key issue.
It's inspirational, isn't it?
Thank you so much. Don't
Thank
go
you.
away.
Well,
Listen.
we are here.
We're gonna chat.
So,
Yeah,
we'll just
we want to bring on Haley. I'm not sure who's going to do that. Jeff, is that you or Shelley?
Shelley.
Shelley? Oh, here she is. Oh, great, great. Thank you so much for being here. I assume, I know you've been listening to this conversation, so welcome. As I mentioned, Haley is the Northern Regional Director of the Arizona Students Association, nonpartisan nonprofit group that works to create and empower student leaders at all the major universities in the state. But she's in Flagstaff and she works mainly with Northern Arizona. So welcome to the discussion. And from this point on, once Haley finishes, the questions can go to anybody on this that we've heard from today. So welcome, Haley. Thanks
Yeah,
for your
thank you
presence.
so much. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, shout out to Brandy and Elijah and Laura. It was so cool to hear about all of your work, especially with high school students. I'm more on the college side, so it was very cool to hear about how we can engage even younger people than the people that I work with. But yeah, my name is Haley Creighton. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her. I am the Northern Regional Director for the Arizona Students Association. I'm 23 and I graduated from NAU in 2022, so a little over a year ago. A little bit of background about ASA. I know she just shared some of it. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that works to empower the student voice and mobilize and organize students around issues that they care about. I do work mostly with NAU, so we have a really great group of students up there. We do a lot of work around higher education, making it more affordable, protecting reproductive rights, climate, and then also registering students to vote. That's a very big part of what we do, but also just encouraging them to get involved, period, and kind of encouraging them to find their passion and to work in the field that they're passionate in, I guess, because we work over a lot of different issues. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about my kind of personal journey, I guess, because that's a really big part of what ASA does, is we focus a lot on the story of self and how we get to where we are, how we choose to do this work, that kind of thing. So just as a little bit of background, I started with ASA in my senior year of college and really just loved the work that we did. And then at the end of my senior year and then through my months postgraduate, I was the campaign manager for Kyle Nitschke, who ran for state senate up here in LD7 against Wendy Rogers. So that was quite a fun race. He did lose, but it was a very cool race. I think it was very cool for both of us. You know, he was 25, I was 22. When we ran that campaign, we focused a lot of energy on connecting to NAU students. And because LD7 is the district that includes the southern tip of Flagstaff, so NAU, and then all through Payson, Show Low, Apache Junction, that kind of district. So it was quite red, but we had all of our NAU students. We wanted to really mobilize them. Kyle was a pro-abortion, pro-education, pro-gun control candidate. He wasn't afraid to really talk about those issues and the issues that really matter to students, because those are the issues that really affect us and that we really care about. So we were really able to kind of work in conjunction with ASA's mission to engage young people and work around the issues that matter to them. So that was, again, he lost, but that was a very cool campaign. I think it was a very cool introduction for me into campaigning and elections, and really just cemented my passion for working with young people. After the campaign, I went back to the Students Association. Kyle is actually our executive director, so he's still my boss. He's phenomenal. I love him. This past semester, ASA we have a fellowship program where we get our students involved. And I had 9 NAU students working for me, and they were able to work around issues and plan events around things like abortion access, climate, cuts to benefits, talking to our legislators, things like that. And they had some really great insight, and just really, it was really great to help them find those issues that they cared about. We also do a thing called the Youth Empowerment Summit. It is our annual summit down in Phoenix, where we get our students from NAU, ASU, and U of A, all down into Phoenix for 3 days. We spend 2 days doing trainings, hearing from speakers like with groups from like Save Our Schools or Trans Queer Pueblo, excuse me. And then trainings around like grassroots organizing, really kind of getting those students, getting them the courage to then do the next day, which our last day is always to lobby at the state capitol. So we actually get to go in and speak to our legislators, have meetings with them, again, see that they are just people. A lot of them are very kind, some of them are not, but a lot of them just, they want to hear from us. They want to hear from young people. They like that we're so engaged. So just really just getting our students to learn how to do that, to have the courage and empower them to do that is so phenomenal. And all of them come away, you know, they go in very nervous and they come out very, very happy with, I think, what we're able to do. So this coming semester, we're doing, our fall is definitely more focused on voting and registering to vote, especially, I know the primary will be next spring, but we're kind of prepping for that. So we're going to do a lot of work around the election, registering NAU students to vote. The big push for that is during move-in week in August and welcome week and things like that. We're hoping to hold some voter education events so students know how to vote and who they can vote for. That's really the biggest issue for students. A lot of them just don't know a lot of these things. They're not told always in high school, you know, how to vote. So I really like starting with high school students. That's a great way to do this work. But also when students come to NAU and they just don't know how to vote, we try to teach them how to. So they either, you know, telling them what's on their ballot, what positions there are, telling them where the drop boxes are on campus. We have a drop box and a voting location on campus. Students don't always know that. And a lot of them also don't know that they can register to vote on campus. They can, or with their campus addresses, I should say, even if they're from out of state, even if they're not residents, if they have an address in Flagstaff, they can register to vote there. So a lot of them don't know that. So telling them that, getting them registered is a really good way, or the way we start out a lot of this work. It's also hard because students tend to move around a lot. It's kind of hard to get us to register because we move every single year, especially if we live on campus the first year and then, you know, off campus the next year. And but also getting them to just remember that they can change their voting address and to change it with us, you know, remind them, hey, re-register to vote this year. There's another election. I know you changed your address to make sure you're registering. That's really important as well. I know we've run into some issues with NAU and NAU faculty who maybe don't want to talk about voting because they think it's too political. They're scared of even just saying, you know, you should vote, or having someone like me come into their classroom to tell their students how to register because they think, they're scared of a lot of, you know, parents or students or the news or whatever coming for them for talking about voting in their classrooms. But we're definitely working around that. We are working with campus to do some of these, and with campus and student government to do some of these voter education events, really trying to get them involved. So I'm very excited to see where that goes this year, and how we can get, how many students we can get registered. I think that'll be phenomenal. I guess a little more background about me, just kind of want to talk about how I got into this work. It was very interesting hearing Elijah talk about how he got into this work as well. I lived through a lot as a young person, especially as a young queer woman-aligned person who was a child of educators in Arizona. I was 8 when Obama was elected president and 15 when Obergeville v. Hodges legalized gay marriage. But then I was also 17 when Donald Trump was elected. I was 18 at the first Women's March and 19 at the second one. I was 18 during the Red for Ed movement, where I saw my parents, you know, protesting at the Capitol for their right to a good job and to fight for their students as well. A really big thing that has motivated me is the fact that all but 2 of America's 10 deadliest mass shootings happened during my lifetime, 4 of which happened while I was in high school. I was 18 when the shooting in Parkland happened that motivated high school students, even younger than I was, to start the March for Our Lives movement. And that was, you know, I've seen a lot of bad things happen. I've seen, you know, our climate deteriorate, queer kids being targeted, restrictions on the rights we have to our own bodies. And I guess I just say all of this not to bring anyone down. I know that's kind of a lot of negative things, but also it's just to show that maybe there is a reason why people my age are sometimes so apathetic. You know, we've lived through a lot, and I think someone in the room had that question about, you know, nothing's changed a lot. You know, we try to have movements or try to make change, and we aren't seeing it happen. So that can make us very apathetic sometimes. But at the same time, I got into this work because I believe in my generation. I believe in the change that we can make. I've seen what happens when we can stand together. I've seen what happens when we use our voices and show people that we have those voices. That's a very big part of what ASA does, is have students, show students that they have power. Show students how to use their stories and use their voices to advocate for themselves, you know, teach them how to do that so they're not relying on the representatives who are maybe much older than them, are different identities from them, but they can instead use their own voices and tell their own stories. I've met so many amazing students and young people in my job, all of whom are incredibly passionate and incredibly inspiring. Like some of the people who just spoke even, it's so inspiring to see the kind of work we can do when we, you know, stand up for it. So I've also, you know, considered myself running for office just to show, you know, young folks the power that we do have. You know, ASA has a number of alumni in the state legislature or who have been through the state legislature, including Representative Solomon, Martin Quezada, and Cesar Aguilar. They've all been through our ASA's program, and that's really what ASA does, is just create our future leaders. So I'm really excited to just keep doing this work with ASA and show students kind of the power that we have and keep building up this next generation of students and leaders who will shape our future. So that's a little bit about me and my work and kind of my passion for this and for working with young people. I don't know if I can hand it over for questions if you want.
That's great. Thank you so much, Haley.
I have a couple of questions from Zoom.
Okay.
Peggy Glenn asked, what about including other colleges, Yavapai, Prescott Regional Community College, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've definitely tried to do some community college outreach. We do include GCU. Kind of our central region has worked with, or is also working towards getting some of their local community colleges involved. We've tried at Coconino Community College, haven't had the best of luck there. So it really is just a matter of, you know, keep reaching out, and especially to our like NAU's extended campuses. You know, NAU has campus in Phoenix, has a campus in Yuma. So we're trying there. It's a little harder with fewer students in some of those places, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of potential there. A lot of students who I think would like to hear our message and would like to know that they have power as well. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Great. And then Lama just wanted to make a note to anybody doing voter registration that if you want to vote in the presidential preference election, they do have to choose a party, can't be independent. That's next March. So just a note to anybody who's doing this.
Anybody else here have questions? Pam.
Okay, so I hope nobody's mentioned this, but if you're talking to high school kids and you say, as soon as you get your driver's license, you can sign up for the PEVL, which is the permanent early voting list. It's not called
No,
that.
it's AV, active voter, early voter list.
Okay,
It's okay.
so mention when you get your driver's license,
Yeah.
can you get on that list at 16, even though when can you first get your driver's license? How old do you have to be?
16.
Is it 16?
It is 16, yeah.
Would they put you on that, or do you have to be 18 to
I
vote?
think we don't have the pre-registration that Laura Brill was talking about, but.
Yeah, I don't think we do. I think the only way that you can actually, I think Lana actually responded.
17 plus 6 months. I think as
Yeah.
long as you are going to be
18 by the
18.
next election.
Yes,
That's when you can
right.
register to vote in Arizona.
Yes.
I have a question about what social media do you guys use? Because I don't think it's Facebook, but that seems to be Be what most of we use.
I mean, I know Instagram's a big one, TikTok's a really big one. So those are kind of the ways that we're trying to reach young folks, I think. I guess more with like fun posts and less maybe information, but I think it's still a way to get their attention and share details with them is definitely through both of those, I think. So
Are there phrases or things that you find motivational? Speaking of the different languages, yeah. Nothing in particular?
I just
think.
I was one of the officials in the last election here in Sedona, and we had a lot of younger people showing up to vote because we had a mayoral candidate who was charismatic. And I am concerned that younger people, and just like most people, get swept away by the charisma of certain candidates. And we need to be cultivating and developing the muscle of knowing the issues and what these people represent, although they might have the vision of somebody you identify with, they're not really going to bring what you want. And I hope that that's a big part of what you're doing, is to get that awareness.
yeah, absolutely. I think the awareness is super important. I think to speak to that, and also kind of the last point as well, when I worked for Kyle and we were kind of trying to reach out to students on campus, we had a few tactics. You know, one of the things was drawing students in with issues that matter to them. So things like reproductive rights, that was a very big thing that drew students in. That it's what caused a lot of students to vote, especially for Chris Mays. So I think starting with the issues, you know, definitely making that like the point and pointing out the issues of the candidates, even with ASA, you know, pointing out here's what these different people believe, here's how they will affect you is very important. I think another thing about messaging, we had t-shirts that said, eat the rich, feed the people, which is, we got a bit of feedback on those, that they were from a lot of some of the older folks running other campaigns, that those were maybe a little inflammatory or just too, you know, bold, but students loved them. I got so many compliments on them. We had so many free, like we gave them out for free on campus. A lot of them wanted them as stickers. So just things like that, students and young people just really like. We like straightforward. We're not afraid of maybe some of the more progressive messaging or the bold, straightforward, out there messaging. I think that's really important to us. It's one of the reasons Kyle was very big on saying the word abortion in a lot of his campaign things. You know, reproductive rights is a great thing to frame it as, but it's also just important that young people like that word. They hear that word, it means something to them. So I think that's something quick about messaging, I guess. I don't know if that was super relevant, but the questions made me think of that. So
No, that was good. That was helpful. Thank you. Ben?
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question.
I have a question for Elijah. So with students whose parents vote differently than they do. So let's say, you know, we're in a red area, the student wants to register as a Democrat, let's say. Are they scared to vote, to register because of that? And how do they handle it with their parents, or what do you say to them?
You know, this is actually really funny because I actually just had a conversation yesterday with somebody from Surprise that is getting registered, or that I'm trying to convince to register as a Democrat. I shouldn't say is fully committed to it yet, but it is very much more, I think, aligned with the issues that Democrats focus on, right? And when I was talking to him about, you know, his upbringing, you know, he grew up very Republican, Mormon, very much in that type of environment of saying, you know, Republican ideologies and conservative ideologies, right, is what, you know, unites that type of environment, that type of community. And so I think the thing that I really try to push to them is, you know, politics is a divisive issue, absolutely, at this point in time. But if your family, and I mean, this is definitely a little bit harsh, but if your family is willing to throw you out and to span you and hate on you only because of your political views, the relationship of your family just isn't strong. And that should be something that you go for and you fix, right? If you want to go and fight fight for the issues that you care about, it is unfortunate and sad to say you are going to alienate some people in your life, and it's inevitable. And so I think that's the unfortunate messaging that we have to play, but it's also the realistic messaging, and it's the messaging that does turn people to say, you know, I'm willing to stand up for the issues that I care about, even if people don't agree with me on.
George?
Now, I don't know if there's a question here so much as a comment, but what we were saying about messaging is appealing to students and youth. One of the things that's been most discouraging to me as a progressive is the timidity of so many corporate Democrats about messaging and thinking, oh my gosh, we'll turn people off. And so many columnists and opinion writers are, well, you know, you gotta be able to be in the middle. You can't be too radical because the Republicans will eat you alive. And my experience from all the messaging that I've been seeing, particularly when progressives run, is that they do so much better. They're able to actually motivate people to vote. And I'm not sure it's just a youth issue so much as I guess so many people older like me grew up thinking, well, you know, we compromised because back, you know, in the 50s and 60s, compromise was a way of getting things done. This is a whole different world. When Elijah was talking about talking to legislatures, I'm thinking, well, yeah, they're Republicans, but has there been actually a shift in voting? Because Republicans and now Democrats pretty much too are finally starting to vote en bloc, and that's really discouraging.
Toby, that'll be the final question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, I was just going to remind everyone that we're going to have a petition for women's reproductive rights, women's rights, that will probably be available September or October, and we need 500,000 signatures. I think we'll get them the next day, but no one else thought that was funny at any time. But you heard it, I put in the chat box, nobody commented. Well, anyways, there will be training is why I brought it up, so that anyone who's interested in getting to the youth, I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming they can carry the petitions, even if they're not 18. I don't know if that's true, but in the training, we'll find out, and maybe they could help get signatures.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. Thanks, thank you. That's a good idea. Speaking of good ideas, Janine and I were talking, and we were talking about my granddaughter that we got her tickets for a Taylor Swift concert the end of that next month. And Janine said, oh, I read about people that couldn't get the tickets because they were so rare. Yeah. Just like thousands of them in the parking lots, dancing and, you know, listening to the music that's coming from the stadium. And we thought that is a great place to register kids. So I went home and I emailed Jason Berlin, who is the head of Field Team 6 that does registration in unconventional ways. And I already heard back from him, and he said, that is a great idea. Because one of the things they advocate for is going to where the kids are. Don't necessarily sit at the library waiting for and you registered 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. So we have to be creative about where we find the kids. It's not just in the schools, they go other places too. So I can't thank you enough. All of the speakers, I thought this is one of our best panels. This has been excellent. Let me just Randy and Elijah for driving all the way up from Phoenix this morning. Yeah. And I'm surprised that you got lost with a person of his age in the car. Yes, so that does surprise me.
It's because I was controlling the tech.
Okay.
Yeah, if it would have been me, we would be right on time.
Let me just say that the Civics Center, and if Laura's still there, Shelley, can you bring her up on the screen? This is a little challenging working with Zoom as well as in person, but the Civic Center and Civic Engagement Beyond Voting are both nonprofit organizations that are doing fabulous work. They both solicit volunteers and they both solicit funds on their websites. These are great places to put your money because you know they're doing good work.
Yeah.
So I thank Laura. I thank, oh, now it looks like I'm backwards. Okay. I thank Haley, Elijah, and Brandy. And let me just say, next month, the topic of this breakfast will be election integrity. We are having Emily Levy from an organization called Scrutineers that does nothing but election integrity work. And Adrian Fontes, Secretary of State, is coming here to the community center in Sedona. So I'm working to see if we can get a bigger room because I think that's going to be a big draw. So that will be on July the 21st. And thank you all for the people that are here. Thank you for the Zoomers. We appreciate everybody. And good to see you. We'll see you next month.
Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend.